Le avventure di Pinocchio, The Adventures of Pinocchio. When I first read the story of Pinocchio to you at school, I was delighted at how much you enjoyed it, and each week you wanted to hear it again. So I thought maybe, seeing that you like this little rascal, you'd like the original story. Pinocchio's been read to children in Italy and in countries around the world, and there's lots of different versions and different illustrations. Walt Disney made a beautiful film about Pinocchio, and this version of Pinocchio is probably the one that you know. However, I want to read you the old story. The language is a bit strange at first, but you'll get used to it. Here's the book I'm reading from. You can see the tattered cover with the picture of Pinocchio. Looks different, doesn't he? What is he wearing? Capitolo1, Chapter 1. The chapter name is so long. Well, that's a bit different from modern stories. Listen to the name of Chapter 1. How it came to pass that Master Cherry the carpenter found a piece of wood that laughed and cried like a child. Well, goodness me, that chapter name tells you just about everything that's in Chapter 1. Let's start. There was once upon a time a king, my little readers will instantly exclaim. No, children, you are wrong. There was once upon a time a piece of wood, un pezzo di legno. This wood was not valuable. It was only a common log, like those that are burnt in winter in the stoves and fireplaces to make a cheerful blaze and warm the rooms. I cannot say how it came about, but the fact is that one fine day this piece of legno was lying in the shop of an old carpenter of the name of Master Antonio. He was, however, called by everybody Master Cherry, Master Ciliegio, on account of the end of his nose, which was always red and polished as ripe as a cherry. No sooner had Master Cherry set eyes on the piece of legno than his face beamed with delight. Rubbing his hands together with satisfaction, he said softly to himself, "This wood has come at the right moment. It will just do to make the leg of a little table." Having said this, he immediately took a sharp axe with which to remove the bark and the rough surface. Just, however, as he was going to give the first stroke, he remained with his arms suspended in the air, for he heard a very small voice saying imploringly, "Do not strike me so hard." Picture to yourself the astonishment of good old Master Cherry. He turned his terrified eyes all around the room to try and discover where the little voice could possibly have come from. But he saw nobody. He looked under the bench. Nobody. He looked into a cupboard that was always shut. Nobody. He looked into a basket of shavings and sawdust. Nobody. He even opened the door of the shop and gave a glance into the street, and still nobody. Who then could it be? I see how it is," he said, laughing and scratching his wig. In those days in Italy, old men wore wigs. "Evidently that little voice was all my imagination. Let us set to work again." And taking up the axe, he struck a tremendous blow on the piece of wood. "Oh, mi fai male! You've hurt me!" cried the same little voice dolefully. This time Master Cherry was petrified. His eyes started out of his head with fright, his mouth remained open, and his tongue hung out almost to the end of his chin, like a mask on a fountain. As soon as he had recovered the use of his speech, he began to say, stuttering and trembling with fear, "But where on earth can that little voice have come from that said, 'Oh, oh'? Here there is certainly not a living soul. Is it possible that this piece of legno, this pezzo di wood, can have learnt to cry and lament like a child? I cannot believe it. This piece of legno, here it is, a log for fuel like all the others, and thrown on the fire it would about suffice to boil a saucepan of beans. How then Can anyone be hidden inside it? If anyone is hidden inside, so much the worse for him. I will settle him at once." And so saying, he seized the poor piece of wood and commenced beating it without mercy against the walls of the room. Then he stopped to listen if he could hear any little voice lamenting. He waited 2 minutes. Nothing. 5 minutes. Nothing. 10 minutes. Still nothing. "I see how it is," he then said, forcing himself to laugh and pushing up his wig. Evidently the little voice that said, "Oh, oh," was all my imagination. Let us set to work again. But as all the same he was in a great fright, he tried to sing to give himself a little courage. Putting the axe aside, he took his plane to plane and polish the bit of wood. But whilst he was running it up and down, he heard the same little voice say, laughing, "Have done! You are tickling me all over." This time, poor Master Cherry fell down as if he had been struck by lightning. When he at last opened his eyes, he found himself seated on the floor. His face was quite changed. Even the end of his nose, instead of being crimson as it nearly always was, had become blue from fright. So, how did you go with that chapter? Was the language a bit tricky? Did you start to get used to it?
Carlo Collodi is the pen name or the artistic name of Carlo Lorenzini. He's the man that wrote the story. He actually said about his own story that it's the life of a wooden puppet, and really it's just a bit of foolishness.
The 1940 Walt Disney cartoon has ensured that the character of Pinocchio remains familiar, but this book is far richer in the details of the adventures of the naughty puppet in search of boyhood. Pinocchio hasn't even been made yet. It's just a piece of wood and already it's showing signs of wickedness. So I hope you're intrigued. I hope you will tune in for the next chapter. Arrivederci.